Throughout America's long and storied history, many presidents have come and gone, with many us labeling them either as the best or worst this country has ever had. What rarely gets discussed are those commander-in-chiefs who did incredible things but don't get the recognition for it. Today on this President's Day, we here at Lace 'em Up bring you the 5 most underrated U.S. presidents. Number 5. Chester A. Arthur. Upon winning the election of 1880, President James Garfield had a frosty relationship with his vice president, Chester Arthur. This isn't too surprising, as Arthur was a career politician who was a member of the GOP's stalwarts faction, and they had no problem giving out political jobs regardless if they were qualified. Things changed in September of 1881 when Garfield faced an assassination attempt that contributed to his death just 200 days into office. This now meant that Chester Arthur was now the president, and if any of his colleagues thought he would continue his stalwart ways, well, they would be in for a rude awakening. Arthur signed into law the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act of 1883, which made it official that political jobs should be given to those with their merit rather than special favors. Arthur also saw the reduction of taxes when the country had a massive surplus. He strengthened the U.S. Navy and signed the Edmunds Anti-Polygamy Act of 1882, which not only made polygamy a crime but also prevented those who practice it from holding office jobs or even voting. Also, he was a big supporter of civil rights for Native Americans and African Americans, although much of his attempts were shot down by Congress. While his signing of the Chinese Exclusion Act was certainly a low point of his presidency, the accomplishments he made helped to lay the path for other presidents who wished to clean up political corruption, like Theodore Roosevelt. Number 4. Calvin Coolidge. The man often referred to as Silent Cal became the 30th president following the unexpected death of his boss Warren Harding in August of 1923 by way of a heart attack. Calvin Coolidge would help to shape 1920s America with laissez-faire economics, which meant fewer regulations towards the federal market and Wall Street, thus leading to a financial period we know as the Roaring Twenties. After being re-elected in 1924, Coolidge continued his economic policies by balancing the budget, shrinking the national debt, and reducing income and federal taxes in the U.S. Coolidge opened the door into investigations regarding the Teapot Dome scandal. He pushed to make lynching a federal crime in the U.S., and much like Chester Arthur, he was a big supporter of Native Americans, African Americans, and women's rights. On the other side of that coin, Calvin Coolidge's presidency also saw him going against farm subsidies at a time when the prices for crops and agriculture were bad. His response and views regarding the Mississippi flood of 1927 were horrible, and his laissez-faire economic policies became a factor in the stock market crash of 1929. Nevertheless, Calvin Coolidge's time as president is often seen with modest success, even if the man himself is forgotten about by most of the general public. Number 3. Dwight Eisenhower. Often in the same league of other great 20th century presidents like Harry Truman and FDR, Eisenhower continued with the same New Deal policies that were used by his predecessors, with his rationale being summed up with this quote: "Should any political party attempt to abolish Social Security, unemployment insurance, and eliminate labor laws and farm programs, you would not hear of that party again in our political history. There is a tiny splinter group, of course, that believes you can do these things. Among them are a few other Texas oil millionaires and an occasional politician or businessman from other areas. Their number is negligible and they are stupid." Eisenhower also helped in leading the way for space research, which eventually led to the creation of NASA, and he pushed for the construction of the interstate highway system while using the Federal Aid Highway Act to get the funds needed, with it being a major accomplishment in fixing the country's infrastructure. On foreign policy, Eisenhower was able to sign an agreement that pulled American forces out of the Korean War, and his handling of the Suez Canal crisis was impressive. That said, many CIA-related coups d'états occurred under his watch, including those in Guatemala, the Congo, the Dominican Republic, and Iran, with the latter seeing the CIA aid the British to overthrow the elected Iranian official, Mohammad Mossadegh, and replaced by a secular dictator who was friendly to the Western powers. And this incident would come back to haunt the U.S. in the years that followed. Number 2. James K. Polk. After winning the election of 1844, President James Polk established an independent treasury in order to manage government funds. He reduced the prices on tariffs and increased the amount of revenue and trade within the United States. Polk was also responsible for creating what would be the Smithsonian Institute, and negotiated a treaty with Britain in order to get the Oregon territories, which would become free states or states that didn't allow slavery. Yet despite all of this, Polk's biggest accomplishment would be acquiring the areas of Texas and California from Mexico, due in no small part to some falsified claims he made about Mexican forces near the Rio Grande attacking American soldiers. This would result in the Mexican-American War, with the U.S. not only claiming victory over the Mexican army but also acquiring the areas of Texas, California and other bits of land that would eventually become New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, Arizona and Nevada through a series of treaties. Believing he had achieved everything he wanted in just 4 years in office, Polk decided to honor his promise and did not seek another term. Tragically, James Knox Polk contracted cholera after leaving the White House and died from the disease at just the age of 53. Number 1. Ulysses S. Grant. As the military general who helped lead the Union to victory in the Civil War, Ulysses Grant was widely popular, especially with African Americans, which is why he was elected president in 1868. After the passing of the 15th Amendment on February 3, 1870. The government, for a period of time, couldn't suppress a person's right to vote regardless of their skin color, race or previous condition of servitude. The first iteration of the Ku Klux Klan was dismantled after Grant passed the Enforcement Act of 1870, with many KKK members put on trial and later convicted for their crimes. Grant also managed to get the Civil Rights Act of 1875 passed thanks to his VP, Henry Wilson, casting the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. However, Grant's habit of giving jobs to friends and family made his administration very corrupt, and combined with a host of scandals involving businessmen, politicians and even some alcohol distillers got in on the action. While his administration was far from perfect, it's safe to say that Grant's achievements in American history doesn't end with the Civil War.